Hello and welcome to another episode of the 21st Century Work-Life Podcast, where we talk about how the world of work and our attitudes to work are changing. I'm your host, Pilar, and you can find out everything about myself and the work I do over at Virtual Not Distant. And this is another guest episode. So, as is customary, now I will ask my guest to say hello to you.
Hello, I'm Jaap Linssen, and I'm happy to be on your show.
And I'm happy to see you because I met Jaap, listeners, already 2 years ago now. To be honest, it seems like it was yesterday, I have to say, at least for me. And I met Jaap at the lovely event that Anna Neves organizes. And this is Social Now. And you might just be in time to get tickets. It's on the 16th and 17th of May in Lisbon. We'll stick the link in the show notes. What was your connection with that event, Jaap? Just remind me, you've been around that event for a while, haven't you?
My connection to the event, Anna did it once in Amsterdam. I think it was the second time she organized it in Amsterdam. We were invited to speak, and we immediately noticed that it has a very different atmosphere and a very different setup than most conferences. It's, I don't know if it's okay to explain it, but she has this fictitious company called Cabelink. Every year she creates a story around it. And everybody that presents there, also the software vendors and the consultants and everybody, they need to actually shape their story around that specific company. So you can't just do a normal product demo. No, you have to take all the names from the company and take the narrative that Anna's created and then actually take people through your product with that narrative in mind, which makes it a lot more interesting than watching 5 or 6 standard product demos from them. Her personality and her warmth make it very nice, and she always makes sure there's really good food. The Portuguese.
It's true.
So it's great.
Yes. And so I've met you as someone who is in the digital workspace space, but I'm not sure. I don't know your origin story in a way. I know you are. Are you the founder of OrangeTrail? What's your what's your title there?
So my title is founder, owner, whatever you wanna make of it.
You're Jaap.
I'm Jaap, and we started OrangeTrail in 2011 with 2 people, Phil Kropp and myself. We were both innovation consultants back then. And maybe is it okay to tell a story about what happened, what my moment was to actually before I started OrangeTrail, I was running an innovation project. I was an innovation consultant at the Dutch National Postal Company. So the project was called Leonardo, and the idea was that we would travel through the whole organization, 6 weeks for every business unit. And together with the business unit owner, we would set up what we call a challenge to the whole company and ask for innovative ideas, basically. Mm-hmm. The technology that we use to support this process is what we would call it a social network. So people would post ideas and other people could reply to them, like them. You could attach stuff to it, take pictures, all of that stuff. And this was in a time where in the Netherlands there had been a government, I think a little later than happened in the UK, where a lot of government things were privatized. And also the postal services were privatized. So these people needed to compete. They were getting competitors, Deutsche Post, all sorts of competitors. They were barely waking up to this. They were all still very much government thinkers. So not a lot of need for speed and change. And at the same time, the internet was coming up. So the mail volumes were dropping 10% year over year. The urgency was super high. One of the board members told me that it felt like driving with 180 kilometers towards a brick wall.
Okay.
So that was the setting there. And what we did was we would collect all these ideas, and then together with the owner, there would be an innovation board with board members. And we would pitch the ideas and request for funding to that innovation board, and they would say yes or no. One afternoon, we were doing this story, and not a lot of ideas came out of it. And what the board member that was responsible for sales, he just lost it. He got angry, and he said, what is this stupid charade? We're driving 180 kilometers towards a brick wall. And we're sitting here spending lots of money with consultants and getting stupid ideas, and there's no good ideas here. Why are we doing this? And so we just went off in a rage. And that, it shocked us. And we went home and thought about it a little bit. And the next day in the office, together with our colleagues, we were talking about what we're supposed to do. And we had this sort of idea. The people that delivered the mail were all getting, they weren't iPhones yet, but PDAs to sign off on things and things. One of the challenge we'd had was to think of other stuff they could do with that phone or that camera on the phone. So we came up with this idea because, there was competition was coming and people weren't moving, people weren't realizing that instead of doing an innovation drive, we would get a very short one. We would get everybody to take a picture of a competitor when they saw one. So we went back to this board member and we said, so, you've been trying to tell people we need to change, and we've been trying to get ideas and nobody's listening. Everybody's just doing what they were doing. And you've been telling them this for 2-3 years and the message is not getting across. You're broadcasting, it's not getting across. So why don't we ask them this question and see what happens? So that's what we did. He prepared a little video and he said, we've been talking from the board that we need to change. Competition is coming, volumes are dropping, but the company's not really realizing. So let's really see where the proof is, and let's see how much competition is out there. So he asked all the people that are out on the streets to take a picture of a competitor and upload it in the ideation system. And within hours, we had hundreds of pictures. And within days, there were thousands of pictures. And in days, a matter of days, the mood in this company, it just switched. It was just from one moment to the other, everybody was like, oh my God, we need to change. We need to do something. And that to me was the big aha moment for the power of social media or social technology and the power of asking questions. Something that when you broadcast, when you tell people what they need to change, it doesn't work. And when you ask them one simple question, give them a bit of technology, and in a few days, there's a big mind shift in the whole company. So that was, to me, the big aha moment that probably led to the birth of OrangeTrail a year later. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so much in there as well. You've asked them a question, you've got them involved. You've got them involved at a time that makes sense to them, whether it makes sense because they see the photos so they have to take it or because that's the time. It's instead of let's all do this now because we've decided that this time we all have to get in a room and come up with the best idea ever. Now.
You need to change now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I imagine as well, because, technology has evolved so much. There's been a little bit of thinking has evolved, I think, as well. Yeah. So I imagine you've evolved a lot in what you do with the company, or maybe not. I mean, the principles I imagine are staying the same. So how has that changed or not?
So we in that sense, we're active in two areas. One is what we call engaging employees with the company narrative. So that story of the postal company is still quite connected to that. So what we do there is help leadership and communication departments to change the way they communicate and start to be more inclusive or ask more questions or pull people in more on the big stories that are playing out still very much related to that. Because what we see is that communications people and leaders, they tend to broadcast. They tend to want to tell people what to do. And when you tell people what to do, they become passive, and when you watch TV, you're passive, but when you're doing something, you're active. So we try to activate people. But that's still very much the case. It's progressed a little bit. It's become a little bit more sophisticated. But where most of our work or has been the last few years has been in collaboration space. So basically that happened when Microsoft Teams hit the market and then COVID hit and everybody learned to work remote. Mm-hmm. Not really. People learned how to do online meeting and make an even bigger mess of the work they're doing. It's there's more meetings, more email, more chat, more. It's just getting worse. Mm. So that's the fight we're involved in right now, is to actually bring back more structure, more focus time, more balance in the work using technology to facilitate that with a principle they call working out loud or working in a narrative.
Tell us a bit more about working out loud. I mean, many listeners of this show will have heard about it in different times and in different contexts. But just for those who might be new, more recent listeners.
So working out loud sounds a bit not so nice in the sense that it's with the word loud. Mm-hmm. But the key principle of working out loud is that you're when you're working, you're actually sharing or showing what you're doing, so that other people can see what you're doing and they can help you, or you can ask a question and people can help. And the way that you do that is in what we call narratives, in technical terms, in a threaded conversation. So, for example, if I would be in a project and I would want to make the project plan, I would, in Microsoft Teams, create a post in a channel and say, hey, I'm working on a project plan. Here's the document. I would put the document in the first post, put it in the right place in SharePoint as well. And there, I would work in the document. And if anything changes, a decision is made, I have a revision, somebody has a comment, it happens in a comment to that first post. And what you create when you do that is what we call a narrative. So if somebody's on a holiday for 4 weeks, they come back, they just start on the top and read, and they know everything there. So what decisions have been made? You don't send each other emails, but you comment, or you comment into the post. So you can actually see the progress that's happening with a document like that. We believe that everything in a company is a narrative. If you're trying to hire somebody, that's the narrative, because you're going through a process of hiring. If somebody joins the company, that's a process. So you can also all collect that information in that way. A customer, a project, a complaint, anything works in that way, that you can actually narrate and work out loud. And so we use these terms interchangeably, which isn't always the best to do, to be clear. But working out loud is actually working in that narrative and sharing when you are doing it, sharing it at that time. So in knowledge management, sometimes people also talk about that you log what you've done. That is what we call in knowledge management, you have working in the flow and working above the flow or out of the flow. If it's something is out of the flow, it's extra work. And when it's in the flow, it's your work. So the key thing to do when you're working in a narrative is that if you would have sent an email, you don't do it, but you put the message there for your colleague. You actually do the work in that narrative instead of having to do it afterwards or having to journal what you were doing, because people don't like journaling because it's too much work. And what you create is, when you do that, is there's a whole bunch of stories in your team. As a team, you get a really good collective awareness of what's going on, what other people are doing, without having to have meetings. So the number of meetings go down a lot. You don't have to send each other emails, so the number of emails go down a lot. So there's a lot of side effects that are really beneficial as well.
That's really, I love that, of course. And especially this concept of how you do it to be in the flow of work, because the issue with these kind of things, whenever you introduce this to people who've never heard of this way of working, is always, I don't want to have to then, do my work and then tell people about the work. But it's getting the process so that the process is part of your workflow. Yeah. How have you found organizations adopting to this? Because I think it's not just about, one, getting comfortable with Teams and being able to create channels, which not everyone can, have worked out. Yeah. Some people just are stuck with a chat and that's it. Yep. But I suppose it's quite a mindset to know, okay, I'll go back a bit. I used to use I think it was John Steppard's phrase of sharing the work in a way that is useful to yourself or others. So how have you found people's mindsets having to change? Because this is not just about sending everything and putting everything. It's quite deliberate and mindful. Yeah, the thing that is hard for people, because people are used to sending each other messages. They don't see things as collected story. It's like having a conversation with people in a room. Who should I have this conversation with, and then put it there and have that conversation with those people. But people still think in sending messages to individual people. So you see the same thing happen when they move to Teams, is they don't create threads. They just send messages, and it becomes a mess. So that's one of the things that is really difficult. So the first seed to plant is to have people start to think of their work as narrative, as stories that progress over time and that you actually capture. Because what we're really not good at is the contextual information around the document. So what happened, what changed where. They're everywhere. They're all over the place. They're in email, they're in meetings, they're in chat. And it's actually a context that is far richer than the document. So that sort of realization you want to get with people first is to start to understand, okay, it's not just that I need to have version control on my document, but it's actually far more interesting that I know why this document has changed over time and what decisions were made, what revisions were made, what comments were made by people, what changed in the market. I don't know. So it's having that understanding of capturing that contextual information alongside with the document in one place,
I think that's the key thing to do, and it not being individual messages that you shoot at people.
I really like that. I hadn't thought of that, of thinking that, okay, we're not messaging, we're creating that narrative together,
Yep.
which does so many things, even just having that conversation and realization. One, it immediately plants the seed of team cohesion. Mm-hmm. So we're not worrying at not being able to to have drinks together after work, especially if we're all remote. Yes, I like that very much, because I see a lot of people have got used to sending messages, and there's this constant thing and just sending off whatever's on your mind sometimes with chat, and especially also for personal chats. So I really like that. This is so interesting. Now, where do I go? So has the introduction, I'm going to go straight into it. Has the introduction of AI changed this? Because what I've seen from the narrative you're creating about your work on LinkedIn, I see a lot of, and from other members of that you work with, is the introduction of Copilot. So the introduction of AI under the hood, especially, or visible. Now, I don't know how this works because I'm now out of the organizational picture. So I only know how ChatGPT and Claude work. Yep. So I'm trying to see what is going on in organizations now when this thing, on top of, they probably still don't know how to work out loud and do all these great things. And now there's something else. What is going on?
That's a really good question. And I don't think there's a simple answer to it. But I think the main trend that I'm seeing is that things have slowed down really fast in like a couple of months. In January, February, everybody was standing on tables shouting, this is going to, and it is, don't get me wrong, this thing is going to change the way we work and what happens massively. What I see in the companies we work with is that it's been introduced for several months. And very often when people get it, 2 weeks later, they don't use it anymore. It like moving from, the traditional way to working out loud or working narrative or asynchronous, or all these terms that we use for it is a big change. I think implementing AI in your work is also a big change because it's, you really need to rethink the things that you do and how to involve AI in it. And that's not easy because AI will give you back very crappy answers if you don't prompt it well. And that's the big thing. So ChatGPT, if you ask it a question, it just searches everywhere. With Copilot, if I ask it what happened in this project, it will look in my email, not in your email, because your email is your email. I don't have rights in your email. And if the project is 5 people, I will get 1/5 of, well, maybe a little bit more because there's replies and stuff, but it doesn't show you the complete picture. So that's something to keep in mind. If you ask Copilot a question, you need to remember where it's going to look and that you're not getting a complete answer from an organization perspective. You're getting an answer from what you can see within the organization. So there's this sense of what am I allowed to see, and therefore how smart can Copilot get in its answers to my questions. So I think that's something people need to get used to. You also see that most people are not getting past like the simple use cases of transcripting meetings, and there you see that it's impressive what it does, but it also hallucinates quite a lot. So
in the meetings as well.
Yes. So
in the transcript.
I've seen it many times that according to Copilot, I've said stuff that I didn't say, or I got tasks that I never got, or so it will make up things. So you cannot blindly send minutes around after a meeting. So I think what people were craving, people never took minutes. Only a few people in big companies actually write minutes and send them to people and stuff like that. So people are like, oh, this is great. So I can keep on not making minutes and I'll have minutes. But that's not the case. So they now get minutes. They need to read them, change them, and then send them on. And so they don't do it. So in the end, they're not helped in that sense. So only the people that really created minutes and made the effort, they're helped by this feature. So it's a bit of a disappointment in that sense. I think when it gets better, that might. But this is the use case that most people, when you ask them, they're like, "Oh, it'll be great because now I don't need to go to meetings and I can see the minute." But then there's the creational side. So it can create emails for you, but it cannot write. If you need to write a good document or a good piece of work, it will not be able to really do that for you. You need to really prompt it well, and a good prompting is what it would be like if you do a really proper briefing of a consultant or an agency. So that process of thinking through, what do I want to see? What does it need to do? That's still very much human and still very much important to get the right response from it. And that's where you see a lot of people don't make the effort to brief it properly or to talk to it properly. And they won't get the stuff they need. And this is more or less where probably 90% of the people sort of get stuck. And where it gets really interesting, I think, is when you start to have it do stuff for you that takes a lot of time or something like that. We experimented. We've just done a hiring round. We got 150 applications. So we loaded all the applications into Copilot and the job profile and then said, which one is the best? And, it gave an answer, which wasn't the best answer, but it did give you some idea of profiles, transferable skills, those types of things. So it was helpful, but it didn't take away anything in the process from me. I still had to read all the CVs. I still had to. But there you could imagine that if it gets a little bit better, and maybe if I get a little bit better at prompting, that would really take away a lot of work from me. But yeah, it's still the chance that it's not doing what you think it's doing, because it's not intelligence. It's just artificial. It's a language model. But that's where you need to start, where you really need to think in what we call use cases. And that, I think, is a journey that a lot of companies need to start, is to actually, in every team and every process, really think through, okay, in what way can we get AI to make things faster or more simple or whatever? And I think that's going to take some time to do. But it excites me as well, because that's the type of work I really like to do. So maybe
Yes.
we should help a lot of organizations do. And what's also fun, what I also like a lot, is that in the past, when people talk adoption of technology, they would train people, click here, click there, do this, turn on this, turn this feature off, do this. As you don't have to do that. It's just you put in text and you click send. That's all the technology that's there. So you really need to understand what to use it for and how to talk to it. And I think that's actually a lot more interesting as a problem than the technology.
It also takes longer
True.
to think through those questions. And I mean, I've been saying this for a while, that it reminds me so much, the adoption of AI into our work and organizations. It just reminds me so much of the online collaboration piece.
Yes. Yeah.
It's exactly the first thing you said right at the beginning was something along the lines of we need to understand what we're doing, where it would fit in. And all of that takes so much time.
Yeah.
And then you have to understand how this thing, like you're saying, how it can work with you, how you prompt it, what it can do, what it does well. And we're recording mid-April, probably this will come out in a couple of weeks, recording mid-April 2024. This is so early still. And I think we want the version that will be everywhere, like in 2027, if we're lucky. That's the version we want now.
Yeah, that's what everybody's dreaming about. And then we get the real version and it's like, oh, really? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and the problem is that ChatGPT is one interface, it does one thing. But in Microsoft, if you have Copilot,
Yes.
you have one in your browser, you have one in Teams, you have one in your email, you have one, and they all do different things. If you ask them all the same questions, you'll get 5 different answers. So that's also quite complicated.
Yeah, I was thinking of keeping my Microsoft account just so I could turn Word documents into presentations with it, but I'm not sure how good it is. Maybe not.
It's not
quite ready there.
that still needs some work.
I'm glad. Okay, so I made the right decision. Yeah. I'll keep doing my stuff. So I'm really curious then, the kind of work that you would do now, then it's where we are now with technology and where people are. What are the kind of things then that you might be helping people with? I mean, collaboration is such a big word, and technology. What might it look like now?
On a smaller level, what we do a lot with the companies that we're currently working with are to get attention, awareness, and we call it the appetite to change the way people work by talking about the problems in the way people work together. So we talk a lot about having too many meetings, which leads to a lack of well-being, stress, all sorts of things. So to create those narratives and then show people how they can actually have more focus time during their day, so they can get stuff done, how to run meetings better, how to change the way they work. And in the end, we tell the story of working narrative again. because to us it's a solution to a lot. So it's that simple thing, but it's also the thing of we're used to, because we used to have paper, and if you wanted somebody else to see your stuff, you would need to take the paper to them. If you look at, that's a whole different story, by the way, but if you look at the conceptual way of our working, it hasn't changed for centuries. We're still, we had clay tablets that we put in libraries, and we're still, it became paper, so it's lighter, so we had more. But we're still putting virtual paper in virtual yellow folders. Nothing changes. It doesn't change. And we're still sending messages like we are pigeons to each other.
Yes.
It's just faster and more. So the only thing that the innovation the past 100 years has been that we do it faster and we do it more, but we're not doing it smarter. And I think that's where we really like to focus. And that's where we try to get people to be enthusiastic of really rethinking, okay, if I do this differently, can I do it better? So that's on a item by item. So it's meetings, it's the sending of files to people. So it's sending attachments, getting attachments back, all the confusion that comes with the different versions, so those types of stories, and how it can be a lot easier if you do it in a different way. So that's on individual levels. And on a bigger level, what we're doing a lot right now with companies is thinking through what is my ambition level? Where do I want to be in 2 years? If you think about collaboration potentially creating a competitive edge, what are the steps that you need to take to get to reach a certain level? That's one. So we actually build sort of a roadmap of skills and things that people need to learn, as well as a lot of these companies, when Teams came, they saw that more as more or less as like a change project. So, they introduced it, they did adoption, made a change. And then when it was done, they stopped, not realizing that, now we have Copilot coming, and there's more changes on the way, and it's going to be more frequent. It's going to be faster. It's going to be less time to do it. So the other thing that where we're active is that we're actually helping all these organizations to create what we call change infrastructure. There are lots of elements that you can have in place that will drive change. So, very simple. It's an intranet or a social network where you can communicate, champions networks, bots that you can ask questions, training, whatever. So there's lots of things that will help you drive change. So next to this roadmap of where you want to go and what's that going to look like, we also we help them actually build this change engine, a permanent change engine that will always run. And if you have something new that comes in, you put it in there and it goes through. That's a big thing that we're working on. And of course, we're working with a few clients to figure out how to get Copilot right.
Yeah.
But that's still very, very much early stages.
If I were running an organization, I'd almost wait a little bit to see what happens with Copilot.
That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So, however, this is very interesting, this change engine. Is that mainly a tech component, or is it tech with behaviors, with processes?
It's all of it. So all of it together. And it's really thinking through, if you do a campaign, or if you have a change and you create an intranet page and you stick it there, and you have a company of 100,000, 1,000 people will look at it. Then if you add stuff you do on your social network, you get the CEO to post it, then you'll have 50,000 people that see one message. So how do you make sure that this message then points to the intranet or whatever? So these things are connected. If you do that in a smart way, you have multiple communities that then support these things. So that's part of it. But part of it is also the champions. So what people in my company are interested to bring the company further, and how am I connected with them? How do I stay connected to the people that are the innovators? And how do I make them feel good? How do we deliver training? Especially in a big company, you can't deliver classroom training anywhere. So it's partly train the trainer. It's partly having online learning paths. You can use social learning where people are in a community and they learn together. So there are lots of different ways to do things. And the key there is you can't do everything. The key there is to understand what works in my organization. What do we have? What's working? What's not working? What are the things that we need to invest in?
My final question around this with you. Do you think this is the next few years might be the time for online communities for communities of practice. Are we anywhere near that being adopted?
It has the time has been there. It's just people haven't realized it. I think the problem with communities of practice is that they're out of the flow. So they're never really part of people's daily activities, and therefore they always fall off your plate. And that's why it's so hard to keep them going. And that's why I think there are some examples where there's I used to have an old Volvo, and a community around that where there was like, I don't know, 1,000 people in the Netherlands that really care, and 1,000 is enough, and really caring, and that makes it work. But in organizations, that's a lot more difficult. It's, first of all, the really caring isn't as big as it is with hobbies. And very often the numbers are a bit smaller. So this is a problem. And the problem is that this is the key thing that we try to do with community practice, but it's basically the thinking stops at sharing stuff. So you just run into an article and you share it. And there's a big problem in timing with that. So if you would run into an article and you would just share it with me, how big is the chance that article hits me at the moment that I need it? That's very small. And therefore, if the community is supply driven in that sense, so the people supply knowledge, that it has this big timing problem. And therefore, what happens in the community just to a lot of people actually doesn't feel that relevant, although it is about what they're interested in, but it isn't time drive. So one of the key things, or there's two key things that we do when we work with these, is we try to make them demand driven. So make communities much more question based. Hey, I'm doing this. I need this. Does anybody have that information? And therefore, when that's shared, it's by definition relevant and timely. So that's a big aspect of it. And the other aspect is that we try to make the community deliver output and valuable output. So we try to work with them and say, let's, like, every month or every 2 months, let's see if we can deliver something to the organization, a best practice or a review of a process, or but that we actually focus the energy of all these people to solve a problem. And when that starts to happen, then communities work a lot better. But most of the time people just share articles.
That's also fascinating. All of that. Right, now now this is when I use my podcast to satisfy my own curiosity.
Okay.
Before we go into education, which I like to end up, but I saw on your LinkedIn that you used to have a Dutch farm cheese business. Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Right.
Is that before OrangeTrail?
That was before OrangeTrail. Well, I actually still own the URL, but it's. So when I was working in innovation, and I was telling people in big companies how to come up with new products.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, what track record do I have to tell these people anything? So I decided that I need to have started a company and gone through the process of doing market research and all of the steps. I need to have some experience. I need to be able to say, look, this is where this has happened. And I grew up on a farm and I didn't live there, but I spent a lot of time there, where they made artisan cheese, farm cheese, which is a lot better than the cheese you buy in a normal store.
I bet.
So I still go there and get the cheese whenever I go to my hometown. But basically what I decided to do was to create my big plan was to create a delicacy shop online, international, and start with Dutch farm cheese and just, have an international and ship it all over the world. So that's what I did. So I shipped some samples to culinary review people in the US or whatever, and they were all like, oh, wow. Yeah. So it started to go. But what happened in the end was that I spent more time answering emails of people asking me questions about cheese than actually selling it. And I remember this one person from Japan, he sent me an email saying, oh, my friends, they're collecting wine and they have caves and stuff like that. I want to have a cheese cave. How do I go about it? Come on,
3 easy
buy
steps.
cheese from it. Yeah. So that it just in the end became too much work and not enough income. So I dropped it.
Interesting. I love it. I love these. I love these stories. I think it's so interesting what comes out. Now, the other thing, when I was all those years ago talking to you, you shared with me a video which I really enjoyed watching. And the title is New Experiments in Self-Teaching. And it blew me away. We'll put the link in the show notes. It's a short video and it's really worth seeing. It says so much about education, society, and self-organization, everything. Yeah. Can you describe the video to us? Just tell us what it was about.
Sugata Mitra, he's a IT guy from India. He saw empty ATM slots in walls in the slums in India. And he's like, what would happen if I would put a computer in there and just let it sit? And he did that. And groups of kids would go around, stand around these things, and they would play around with this computer. And he found out that the computers had English on them. So they used the Oxford Dictionary, and they were actually learning to speak English because they needed to speak to this computer. And nobody was teaching them this, that they were just figuring that out themselves. And when he started to see that these kids were learning these things themselves, he started to think, okay, so how big is this self-learning capacity of kids, and how can I make it bigger? How can I make it grow? And what this thing describes is some experiments that he did. One experiment that he talks about is very interesting. He puts a computer in the slums of Sri Lanka and puts scientific research text on them about genes and genomes. Says to kids, go use this computer and I'll come back in 6 weeks and you guys tell me what you found out. And he asked the school teacher to walk by, and he calls that the granny roll. He walk by every once in a while and look at them and say, wow, I wish I could have had that when I was your age. And besides that, not do anything. Oh, wow. Don't tell them anything, nothing. Yeah. He comes back after 6 weeks and he asks the kids, so what did you learn? And they say, oh, nothing. We don't understand anything. It's in English and it's difficult. So besides that the genome does blah, 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 we didn't understand any of it. Like, wow. So they did understand it. So that's where the story starts. And then one really great example he has is that they did an experiment in Italy, where they had the best teacher of Italy teach a class, and they had a class without a teacher. It did have a granny in that role. Mm-hmm. One class he put in groups and gave everybody an iPad, and he asked the groups, how does this iPad know where it is? And the other group, the teacher would teach them normal trigonometry, which is the same thing as GPS. And they tested the knowledge levels of both after I don't know, a couple of weeks or something like that. And what they found was that the actual level of knowledge was more or less the same. So the people that were explaining GPS, the tracking system, how does the IP, they were explaining the same principles as that the teacher had taught the other people with trigonometry. The big difference, well, of course, is that there was no teacher. It was only a granny walking around saying, oh, wow, you guys are doing great. I wish I could have. But the retention was much higher. And the fun people had was a lot higher. So that realization, all of that research, he translated into a principle called SOLE. Mm-hmm. So I forgot what it stands for, but it's basically there's actually quite a few initiatives, especially I think in South America, where they're doing this type of teaching, long distance, very much digital, and getting kids to figure out stuff themselves. And the reason I talked, so we also got really inspired with it. So we set up what we call social learning. Mm-hmm. What we would do, for example, around topics like collaboration or community management, we would have a community of people. You need more interested people than normal in a company. So you can't do it with disengaged people, but the engaged people, you have them in a community, and we would just ask them a series of questions, and they would actually figure things out themselves. And what we would do with them is they would create the curriculum themselves. So instead of giving them a book beforehand and them reading it, they would actually create the book, and that being the learning process. And what you see, if you need to get the topic right, you need to get the questions right, but there's a really steep learning curve. It's an amazing story. And when I learned about the guy, I went to the school of my kids and I said, "Oh, you guys seen this? You need to do this."
And
nope.
Nope.
Well, you do see slowly that the way that people are being taught now looks a lot more like my kids are a lot more independent and they need to figure stuff out themselves a lot more than I used to have to do when I was in school.
Yeah.
But it's still nowhere near just asking kids a couple of questions and then going away and seeing what they come up with.
And having a granny. Because
and having the granny is crucial. Yeah. Somebody going by and saying, "Oh, wow!"
Yeah, that is like because a lot of you can imagine some kids who are kind of interested. Someone says, "Oh, wow! I wish I could have done." Oh, okay. That's amazing. When I find that, like, I mean, as always, I always think you need so much more time to operate in that way. I think the self-learning always takes more time, but the benefits are so much higher. I mean, not only do you work things out by yourself, which exercises all kinds of muscles, not just gathering information, but like you said, you retain it better because you've dug it out yourself in whatever way, and the fun element. And that's amazing. And also, I'm thinking that now with AI in all its different forms, how it's becoming more accessible and how it's coming out in different ways, and how important self-organization and how much easier self-organization would be if we think even in organizations. But I just think it's that element of time and trust, actually. Great. Well,
absolutely.
So thank you for that. I'm sure listeners really, really have it is beautiful. This video is absolutely beautiful.
It'll make you laugh and it'll make you cry.
Yes,
in a good way. Yeah.
So what are your hopes for the future then, for the world of work or for humanity? A small question just to wrap up with last words from Jaap.
Well, I think that my hopes are still the same. When we started the company, is that the thing that I'd really like to contribute is that people feel more valued and feel more part of the journey that the company is on, or than they do now. Because I think, and the research also shows it, that I think about 80% of people are to some extent disengaged with their work or with the company, because the place is just too big to feel really connected, to really understand what your work, how that relates to what the client gets or whatever. And I think new forms of communication, new forms of collaboration can really be beneficial. And I do worry that, like with a lot of things, is that in the end, what AI is going to deliver is people being less people, because AI can do it. And I'd like to have a world where things are a little bit more, how can we create, it's like almost work is like a place where you go to have a good time, or to feel that you matter. Instead of worry that you're going to be a cost and too expensive or whatever, and that you're redundant. And I think that's what we with the company. That's the idea behind what we try to do, is to really make people feel that they matter.
Yeah, great. So if people want to find out more about the OrangeTrail, you can go over to OrangeTrail.com. And where's the best place to connect with you, Jaap?
You can always come and have a coffee in our office, or the little coffee place next to our office in Amsterdam, in the Pijp, a really nice neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. I'll be there soon.
And if that's off limits, then LinkedIn is a good way to connect, and then we'll take it from there.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much, Jaap Linssen. I will stick the link to LinkedIn, in the show notes, and I might at some point when I'm in Amsterdam next, come and have a coffee, because that is still something that I enjoy very much in person.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast. We know there are many other shows for you to choose from. Remember to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, and you can check out the full show notes over at virtualnotdistant.com/podcasts. Talking of podcasts, we have another show you can listen to, Management Cafe, which you should also be able to find on all podcast apps. I have been Pilar Ortiz. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.